Hello, my name is Melanie Hughes. I am a 22-year-old recent college graduate, and not until a few weeks ago, I had never read the Percy Jackson series. Now, I wish I could go back and shake my past self and ask her when and why I decided to so callously disregard my own happiness and joy, but I can't. So instead, I just want to talk about it. I want to talk about Percy, and I want to talk about Annabeth, and I want to talk about Grover, and ultimately I want to talk about how children's books, if we'll call it that, middle grade, but children's books can give us so much. This is a video that hopefully will give you the sign that if you've been wondering, should I read an old series I read when I was a kid? Should I read something even if I am 10 years too late? Whatever. Here's your sign that it's not too late. You can, and you should, and you'll thank me later. So an experience that I have had in my pandemic living is realizing that in a lot of ways I feel like I'm reverting to like a 10-year younger version of myself. Like a good middle school 12-year-old, that's kind of where I'm at. I don't know if it's a defense mechanism. Could be, but it doesn't seem crazy to me that that is happening. A lot of my friends have expressed similar things. And part of the reason that I feel like I'm sort of reverting back to this middle school version of myself is that I recently graduated college. Not that any ceremony or anything like that would tell you. We're past it. But I recently graduated college, and the first and only plan I had until just recently was, I guess I'll move back in with my parents. And there is no shame in that. Right now, majority of people my age are doing it. And even when we're not in a pandemic, that's totally understandable. That people would have transitions or just different periods of their life where they might be in places they didn't expect. And this is one of those periods for me. I never could have foresaw it, but here I am, attempting to understand it. So all that to say, I'm living back with my parents. The last time I did that was when I was 18 years old in high school. And for the beginning of the pandemic, my brother, who is 26 years old, also moved back in with my parents. Now, we have not lived together for a hot minute, and we were back to a family unit, sitting down at the dinner table, exchanging different people cooking every night, the whole shebang. And suddenly, I'm back in my childhood bedroom. So there's a lot of crazy things happening. I think that's happening for a lot of people. And I just want this video to be a video that tells you that if you have been wondering, is it okay to lean into that a little bit and maybe enjoy the things I did when I was a kid? If it is okay to read those old books, if it is okay to watch something that's geared towards a younger age group, here's your sign. It is okay. Even if it's a way of protecting yourself, but more likely, it will give you joy, and we need that. So here's the deal. About a month ago, I realized that a lot of the books I was reading were books that were taking me a long time to get through. They weren't necessarily nail-biters or, had me on the edge of my seat. They were beautiful, and the language was beautiful, which is something I so appreciate. But when it feels like the world is ending and nothing is sure, I just wanted something that would make me smile and would make me excited and put me in a great adventure. And so I realized that I had never fully read the Percy Jackson series. So a few weeks ago, I packed a little knapsack, I threw some snacks in, and I left my front door to go out on the wide adventure of jumping into the Percy Jackson series. Now, the first book, The Lightning Thief, was one that I remembered quite well. Now, that is only between the first two because I read these, years and years ago. They're the only ones I ever read. But I did remember The Lightning Thief quite well. What was nice to me about this book, though, because it wasn't necessarily very surprising and I knew what was going to happen, but what stood out to me as probably my favorite part of it was getting to know Percy again and getting to know these core characters, Annabeth and Grover and Percy's mom and all of that, and hearing the lore again. But I loved jumping back into the feet of Percy, and I loved experiencing his humor and his personality and his insecurity. All of it, again, was so fun. I will say the later books in the series gave me that like thrill and excitement more. I think the adventure only increases and gets better and better throughout every single book. And I remembered this one, so some of that wasn't quite there for me yet. I remember a few times thinking, oh, that was a silly decision, or wasn't it so obvious that that was gonna happen, or you walked right into a booby trap, so many things like that, and then I would be like, is it ridiculous that I would think those things, and then realize again that these are 11-year-olds? Probably. All that to say, The Lightning Thief was the beginning that I needed. It had me so pumped to get into the next books. So next is obviously Sea of Monsters, which after this one I'm not going to have these editions to hold up anymore, which is sad, so I'm going to enjoy it while it lasts. So as I was in the mindset of Percy in the Sea of Monsters, I think like Percy's character, it took me a little bit of time to warm up to Tyson, but oh my goodness, I just love that this is kind of like the birth of Tyson in the series, particularly in the Battle of the Labyrinth. Tyson is just like such a heartwarming character. I just want to hold him. I want to be with him. I want to journey life with him by my side so he can hug me at any time. He is all that is innocent and pure and honest and genuine in the world, and I want to protect him and value him forever. So it was really fun to meet his character again, and since this was the only other book that I had read, I had no idea that he was going to become such a valuable and meaningful character, especially later in the series. So I look fondly back on this one as kind of Tyson's origin story. Something that impresses me about Rick Riordan's writing in each of these books is in different books, vital characters are missing for a big part of that. In Sea of Monsters, that was Grover. In The Titan's Curse, that was Annabeth. These are just characters that I've fallen in love with, and yet I'm not mad or bored when they're not there. It's still just as much of an adventure, which is amazing to me because Grover and Percy's friendship is such a big part of these books, but the book still worked and moved so well, even though Grover's off trying to find Pan the whole time. Also, it was really nice to have some more Annabeth and Percy time. I do remember in this book being frustrated, though, when Percy and Annabeth go to the spa island. I don't remember the specific name of it. That was a moment where I was like, ah, yes, these are 12-year-olds that, despite the fact that this is incredibly obviously a trap, still choose to go there because they're tired. And where does it end up? Hamsters. Anyways, that was a moment where their ages definitely stood out to me, which I think is a necessary and important thing too. I want to remember that these are kids, and the fact that they are shows how strong and amazing and capable they are, and leads me to be more inspired and more moved. I digress. I think The Sea of Monsters was the first book in reading the series that made me really appreciate the craft of Rick Riordan. I am a writer myself. I'm working on a book I've written my whole life, but I've never tried to write anything geared for younger ages. But it was in this book that I realized how all of the characters were so distinct, and their motivations and their reactions were clear and tethered to who they were as human beings. So it made sense why the dynamics were the way that they were. And it just gave me a really massive appreciation for Rick Riordan and the incredible intentionality that is in this whole series, and how despite the fact that they are accessible to all ages, that doesn't mean that they don't have depth. Also, when I finished this, I decided to watch the movie knowing full well that it would probably be a massive disappointment. And I had totally forgotten the wild and insane plot that they follow in the movie. Where that script came from, I guess they must have known that they weren't going to make any more movies because they made Kronos, big and his limbs pieced together and everything at the end of Sea of Monsters, the second book in the 5 of them. When I saw that, I was like, actually, what is happening and why, and the tarnishment you have done is ridiculous. Now, something that left me a bit wanting with the first two books, which I think is evidence to kind of what books I'm used to reading and what content I'm used to receiving and all of that type of stuff, is that despite the fact that it's obviously very dangerous to be a demigod, I knew that nothing bad was going to happen, really, because nothing really bad had happened yet. We had heard violent stories about how other demigods had died or these types of things, but it hadn't happened to the immediate characters that I loved yet, so it didn't feel real yet. And that was something I craved a bit, and boy oh boy did the Titan's Curse deliver. Woo! The Titan's Curse was not playing any games, and that is the darn truth of it. From right out the gate, the Titan's Curse is blasting with characters left and right, and I was eating it up. This was another moment where I was very impressed by Riordan's ability to weave so many characters together and to make so many characters distinct in such a quick period of time. It's not a massive book, but we have the introduction of Zoe Nightshade and Nico and his sister, and Talia comes back from a tree, and we have the sea cow, and we have the Pegasus, and just so many things are going on in the Titan's Curse, and it was a thrill ride from start to finish. I was having so much fun getting into the books I had never read. I had no idea what was going to go on. I had no idea what monsters they were going to come in contact with. I didn't know if Nico was going to only be totally bad by the end. I was worried that he was going to become a villain, and then his character becomes so complex, and I realize I'm talking so fast. I apologize! Anyways, what was so great to me about the Titan's Curse is there is so much character growth that happens in it, particularly in Zoe and Talia's character. We've got these two incredibly strong girl characters, which I loved to death, even though they are butting heads with Percy all the time. It's because they've got this natural leadership. They have their eye on the prize, they're strong, and it was so awesome to see their characters. I really, really appreciated that. There are so many characters in these books, and there are so many characters that you can find yourself in, and that there are boys and girls that are kicking butt and taking names. And the character arc, especially of Zoe, there's her ship name if you need one. Zoe and Talia by the end made me emotional. I think The Titan's Curse was the first book that I actually was emotional in it because Zoe's sacrifice, it's making me a little emotional right now just thinking about it. Also, they're 13. I mean, she's a huntress, but still. All that to say, the Titan's Curse had such a higher level of maturity and depth to it that I didn't know if the series would have, and if it didn't, it wouldn't have been surprising. It wouldn't have necessarily been a problem. You know, they're 13-year-olds. But as these characters grow up, you see that Rick Riordan makes the stories more mature and more painful, and the stakes are raised so much. That leads me to the Battle of the Labyrinth. Which, at the point I was reading it, it was definitely my favorite of the series, and it still might be. It's hard for me to, when a final book in a series is done well, know how anything can kind of compare to all the wrap-ups that happen, but the Battle of the Labyrinth was so good. It was so fun. I loved the device of the maze. All of these books are about a quest, but this one especially felt like one. I loved that we got to see Annabeth's architectural mind even more. I love that that's a part of who she is, that we have this young female character that loves architecture. I've never read a female character that loves architecture and is so smart and wise like Annabeth. Like, what a role model no matter what age you are. But the Battle of the Labyrinth really forgoed any silly booby traps or anything like that, and was next level quest. All the characters were just, badass from start to finish. I loved especially seeing the interesting relationships that Tyson and Grover had, or Tyson and Annabeth did. I loved seeing the softening of her to him. I loved that Grover and Tyson go off and that there's these multiple kind of missions happening at the same time. And then again, we have a lot more wonderful characters thrown in the mix. I mean, outside even just campers, we have Quintus and Rachel and Mrs. O'Leary. I knew Mrs. O'Leary was gonna be the best from the moment I saw her. And Briareus, however you say his name, and Paul, and Calypso? Now, I will say, Calypso was not a turn that I expected to happen. I'm like, I love Percy and Annabeth, but Calypso is such an interesting character. And I loved that Rick Riordan showed this picture that people and sides are not just totally good and totally evil, and that Calypso was on the wrong side of history. But she's a fascinating and interesting character who is still valuable and full of love. And I think that that was a necessary and really amazing conversation to be having in these books. You see that come up again in the final book, with characters kind of walking the line of what side to be on, or only being on one side because they want to be there to win, or these conversations that are happening that are bringing in the idea of history and what side you want to be on. And there were so many, particularly, okay, I'm jumping into the 5th book, but we'll just go ahead with it. To see especially that Luke and Ethan had moments in the end where they weren't just caricatures of bad guys, but that you saw their heart for a moment, that there was redemption. Redemption is my favorite thing in anything. In a book, in a movie, in a TV show. I feel so hopeful by the idea that people are not totally lost or just totally full of dirt and garbage and trash, and that even the motivations of these characters are real and interesting and nuanced. The complexity, in the end, is amazing. In The Last Olympian, Rick Riordan weaves everything together so beautifully. The characters, the plot lines, the backstories, the motivations, the relationships are all woven together in this incredible tapestry of adventure and friendship and love. Somehow, in the last book, and I will never know how authors can do this in the final book of a series, every character has their moment to shine. Tyson, Grover, Chiron, Talia, Percy, Annabeth, Mr. D, Nico, Percy's mom, Paul even, Luke, and Ethan even, and a million other campers. I mean, Hermes, Hades, Poseidon, Rachel. I could just keep going on and on. It's amazing that throughout these series he created so many characters, and they all have a conclusion, and it doesn't feel just like, oh, we have to end, so everything's perfect now, ta-da! It feels genuine and natural, and that is so amazing! In this conclusion, the moments of ignorance and kind of lack of space to grieve and feel things deeply were seriously nowhere to be found. It was kind of soul-crushing at times, and heartbreaking, and moving beyond belief, and these characters have grown up before my eyes. In a week I watched all these characters grow, and I felt kind of like I was growing with them, and even if I am feeling like I am a child again and not an adult, and I didn't have a graduation and I don't know what to do with my life and a pandemic is going on, I was left inspired and moved and feeling like my body can do things and relationships matter and redemption comes and the good guy wins and the characters that are on the fence have their moments. I think one of my favorite little tiny plot lines that can happen with characters in books is when you have a character that could go either way, that is maybe leaning more towards the dark side, or however you want to call it. I'm thinking specifically of Mr. D in my mind, but then they are the ones that show up in the moments that matter most. I love it so much. I mean, how many times did Mr. D show up when the gods who are supposed to have everything together, who are supposed to know how to do everything, don't show up and are weak and flawed? I mean, what messages Riordan is sending to us in an accessible package for everyone. By the end of the series, in ways that are so beyond where it begins, the heroes live up to their names and the big three come together. I just think that we have so much to learn from these books, or Harry Potter, or books that are traditionally marketed to younger ages, or whose characters are much younger than us. I remember I was looking for the third and fourth book, and I looked on Facebook Marketplace, but somebody marketed the books as great reads for 9 to 13-year-old boys. And it made me laugh, and not that I'm some old person, or I'm always questioning if I'm even an adult, but I kind of want to message that woman and say, hey, you know that book that you said that's for 9 to 13-year-old boys? I know a 22-year-old woman that would argue that, no, it's for everyone, and we could all read it, and we could all take so much from it. I'm not sure if I expected myself to really go in this direction in this, and I'm sorry if it's so rambly, and I am not entirely sure what I set out to do here. But I think the message and the feelings that I've been having so much these last few weeks, because I just read the Percy Jackson books, and now I'm reading Twilight, like, 13-year-old Melanie is squealing alongside me, that it's okay to not lean into these really highfalutin things that make us, moan to get through, but by the end we're happy about, but to lean into simple joys. And the Percy Jackson series gave me so much genuine joy. I hadn't stayed up until 3 a.m. to read or finished a book in a day in years, and that brought me a lot. And that's worth something, especially in a pandemic. So, to close, give me a moment. This is important. Let's go. Be patient. Patience is key. I'm almost there. So, here's your permission slip to read the book that you haven't read since you were a kid. Here's your permission slip to read children's books. Here's your permission slip to read or to watch or to do anything that will give you joy and will make you stay up late and feel like life matters and is whole and worthy and interesting. That throw was very anticlimactic. So those are my thoughts on reading or watching or anything that might be meant for an audience that you don't seem to fit into perfectly. And I feel like this is really just a speech on the fact that we're all trying our best and we're coping in the ways that we can. And to find things that make us smile and to find things that make us giggle and that make the people around us look at us like, what you doing? What you reading? Why are you laughing like that? It's worth it. It's worth it. And those are my feelings. Oh, last thing. What great timing to be reading this and then for it to be announced that Disney is making a series. I couldn't have been more thrilled. Oh my gosh. Please, for the love of God, let them be 11-year-olds and let Percy and Annabeth be a slow burn until the very end because they're children, and then by the end it's so beautiful and that's the way it's meant to be. I sincerely hope that after this video, you go read Twilight or Harry Potter or Percy Jackson or Anne of Green Gables or whatever it is that made you smile as a kid, and you remember that the thing that made you smile when you were a kid still can do that today, and maybe your younger self was not such an idiot or such a fool, and that we're still learning and life still matters. Okay, that's it. See ya. I gotta go. Goodbye.